Lieutenant Aaron Hale moved carefully through the alien jungle, his boots sinking softly into the damp soil. The place was alive with sounds he had never heard before, low hums, insect-like chirps, and the faint rustle of creatures hiding in the dense leaves. The air was heavy, humid, and smelled faintly sweet, almost like overripe fruit. He tightened his grip on his scanner, but he already knew he had gone too far. His orders had been clear. Do not cross the perimeter markers. But the strange light that had glowed in the distance had pulled him forward, curiosity overpowering his discipline. The jungle seemed endless. Every tree taller than any he had seen on Earth, their bark slick and glowing faintly with patches of moss that pulsed in rhythm like a heartbeat. He felt watched, though he had seen no sign of anything larger than a bird. His training told him to turn back, to report and wait for a team. Yet a voice in his head, stubborn and reckless, urged him to take just a few more steps. Humans had not come all this way across the stars only to be stopped by fear. He crouched to study the ground. There were tracks pressed into the soil, too clean, too precise. They curved in patterns no human footsteps could make. He ran a hand across them and frowned. Whatever left these marks was heavy, balanced, and deliberate. Not the random scurrying of animals. Something intelligent had walked here. His pulse quickened. The canopy above shifted with the breeze, shafts of blue-green light filtering through. Aaron looked up, half expecting to see a drone or another soldier. Instead, only silence pressed against him, thick and uneasy. He swallowed, hard, and wiped sweat from his brow. "I've really done it now," he muttered under his breath. The deeper he walked, the stranger the sights became. Vines as thick as his arm hung down like ropes, their tips glowing faintly. Small winged creatures darted between them, their bodies trailing tiny sparks of pale fire. He should have been amazed, but unease stayed with him. Something in the air carried weight. Not danger exactly, but attention. He was not alone. A faint growl broke the silence. Low, controlled. It froze him where he stood. He turned slowly, his breath catching, but the jungle looked unchanged. The sound had been close, far too close. He forced himself to breathe quietly, keeping his hands visible and away from his weapon. His heart hammered in his chest. The growl came again, sharper this time, like a warning. Then the shadows moved. At first he thought it was a trick of the leaves, but then she stepped forward. Tall, lithe, and unlike anything he had seen before. Her figure was humanoid but marked by clear differences. Ears, long and pointed, flicked at every sound. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, slit like a predator's, fixed straight on him. A long tail swayed behind her, not lazily but with the steady rhythm of control as if testing his reaction. Aaron's throat went dry. The stories had spoken of them, the jungle guardians, a people his commanders had warned him to avoid at all costs. They were not enemies but not allies either, independent, fierce, territorial, and here he was, standing on their ground. She said nothing at first. Her gaze studied him like he was an insect caught under glass. Aaron shifted slightly, trying to show he meant no harm, but her ears twitched sharply at the motion and her tail flicked once in warning. He froze again. For a long moment, they stood locked in silence. The jungle sounds seemed to fade around them. Aaron's mind raced. He could not reach for his weapon. It would be suicide. He could not run. She would catch him in seconds. His only option was to wait. Her lips curled back slightly, a sound escaping her throat that was neither human nor animal, something between a hiss and a growl. She stepped closer, her movements smooth, predatory, but not rushed. Each step measured, each glance deliberate. Aaron felt as if he were prey being tested, evaluated. Despite the fear rising in his chest, he forced himself to meet her eyes. Not challenging, but steady, respectful. He had learned once, long ago, that predators watched for weakness. If he showed only fear, it would be the end. His lungs ached from holding back shallow breaths. The alien woman, young, beautiful, yet filled with wild strength, paused only a few steps away. Her tail flicked again, sharper this time, and her ears tilted toward him like a final warning. Then she hissed, the sound sharp and cutting through the heavy air. Aaron knew in that instant he had gone too far. Aaron's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths as the alien woman stood over him, her sharp eyes unblinking. The hiss still rang in his ears, echoing in the silent jungle. Every muscle in his body told him to move, to fight or flee. But his mind screamed that either choice would end badly. She was too close, too fast, too strong. He had seen the way her body moved, controlled and precise like a predator who had done this many times before. Her hand shifted, claws catching faint light as she crouched low, the motion smooth as liquid. Before Aaron could react, she sprang, forward with terrifying speed. In an instant he was on the ground, pinned beneath her. His back hit the damp soil hard, knocking the air from his lungs. Her hand pressed against his chest with surprising strength, claws grazing close enough that he felt the sting of pressure but not the cut. Her other arm braced by his shoulder, keeping him caged like a trapped animal. Aaron froze, his heart thundering, in his ears. He forced his breathing to calm, though every nerve screamed in alarm. Her face hovered close above his, eyes narrowed, pupils thin and sharp. Her ears twitched, reacting to his shallow breaths, and her tail lashed once in irritation. She hissed again, louder, a sound that carried not only threat but command. He swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to trespass," he said quietly, his voice low, careful, each word steady. He knew she likely did not understand his language, but the tone mattered. Aggression would make things worse. Fear would confirm he was weak. Respect was his only weapon. For a long moment she stared at him in silence, her expression unreadable. Then slowly, her head tilted, as though she was measuring his words even if she could not understand them. Her ears flicked again, but the pressure of her claws eased slightly against his chest. Aaron resisted the urge to move. The ground was damp beneath him, the jungle air heavy, but his focus stayed locked on her eyes. He could see small details, now. The faint stripes that ran across her cheekbones, the way her skin caught the dim glow of the moss around them, the way her breath came in soft huffs through her nose. She was not only alien but alive in a way that unsettled him, sharp, wild, unrestrained. Her tail tapped against the ground once, then twice, as if she were weighing some decision. Finally, she leaned closer, so close Aaron felt the warmth of her breath on his face. He forced himself not to flinch, though his instincts screamed. She let out a sound again, not quite a hiss this time. Something shorter, almost like a word, low and guttural. Aaron blinked. "What are you saying?" he whispered, more to himself than to her. His hand twitched against the soil, but he kept it far from his weapon. Slowly, carefully, he placed his palm flat against the ground, showing her he was not reaching for anything. Her eyes flicked down, following the motion, then back up to his face. Another hiss, softer this time, followed. Seconds felt like hours. Aaron's body ached from holding still, but he dared not move. Her grip remained firm, pinning him easily, reminding him of just how powerless he was if she chose violence. Yet, something in her stare had shifted. It was not pure hostility anymore. It was study, curiosity. Finally, her tail brushed against his side, light but deliberate. He stiffened at the touch, not knowing if it was a warning or something else entirely. She let out a low sound again, one that seemed layered with meaning he could not understand. Then, with suddenness that made his chest jolt, she pressed her tail firmly across his chest, right over his heartbeat. Aaron's breath caught. The motion was purposeful, almost ceremonial. Her eyes stayed locked with his as if waiting for his reaction. He did not resist. Slowly, carefully, he nodded once, showing acknowledgement. Her pupils widened slightly, a flicker of something new passing across her face. She held there a moment longer, then finally pushed herself up. Aaron gasped for air as the weight lifted from his chest. She did not leave, though. She crouched beside him now, tail still twitching, eyes unblinking. Aaron sat up slowly, moving, with care. His body trembled from the sudden release of tension, but he hid it as best he could. "I don't know what that meant," he said softly, "but I think you've made a choice." She tilted her head again, ears flicking as if catching the rhythm of his voice. She stood in one fluid motion, tall and poised, then gestured with her hand, a sharp downward sweep that seemed to mean, "Stay." He obeyed, holding still, though every instinct urged him to rise. The jungle around them remained quiet, the only sounds their breaths and the faint hum of unseen creatures. Aaron realized then that he had crossed into something larger than himself. This was not just a chance encounter. She had seen him, tested him, and, for reasons he could not yet grasp, she had decided not to kill him. Instead, she had marked him, and whatever that meant in her world, he knew it would change everything. Aaron could still feel the weight of her hand on his chest even after she had pulled away. His breathing steadied, but his heart kept hammering, each beat reminding him how close he had been to losing everything. The alien woman stood a few paces from him now, her tail swaying slowly, her eyes never leaving him. She looked less like a predator about to strike and more like a judge deciding what to do with someone who had broken a law he could not understand. He pushed himself up from the ground, careful not to make any sudden moves. Soil clung to his uniform, and sweat ran down his temple, stinging his eyes. He wanted to speak, to explain himself again, but his words felt useless. She did not know his language, and yet something in her gaze told him she understood more than he expected. Then, without warning, she moved closer again. Aaron tensed, ready for another strike, but this time her claws stayed retracted. She leaned down, pressing her tail once more against his chest, firmer now, almost like a seal. He stayed still, forcing himself not to resist. She let out a short, sharp sound, something between a growl and a word, and held his gaze. Aaron swallowed. He didn't know the meaning, but he felt it. It was not just threat, it was choice. She was claiming something. Him. When she stepped back, he felt lightheaded, as though the jungle air had grown thinner. She circled him slowly, her steps deliberate, studying every part of him. Aaron resisted the urge to turn with her. Predators circled prey before the kill, but her movements were too calm, too measured. It was not about attack anymore. It was about inspection, about judgment. Finally, she stopped in front of him again. Her hand rose, and for a tense second, Aaron thought she might strike. Instead, she touched his shoulder lightly, claws grazing but not cutting. Her ears flicked, and she let out another sound, lower this time, almost soft. "I don't know what you want," Aaron said quietly, "but I'll follow your lead." It was all he could offer, and he hoped his tone carried respect. Her eyes narrowed slightly, then she turned her head, looking deeper into the jungle. With a swift gesture of her hand, she motioned for him to move. Not away, not back toward safety, but forward, into the wild heart of her territory. Aaron hesitated. Every warning he had ever received about this planet screamed against the idea. Humans were not welcome here. The guardians of the jungle were said to protect sacred grounds, and any trespasser was rarely seen again. Yet she had chosen not to kill him. Instead, she wanted him to follow. He took a breath, then nodded. Slowly, he stepped forward. She moved with him, walking a little ahead, her tail swaying in a rhythm that felt purposeful, almost like a guide. The jungle seemed to shift as they walked. Strange plants rose higher, their shapes unfamiliar, their colors deeper. Creatures darted between the trees, keeping their distance but watching with wide, glowing eyes. Aaron noticed how they gave the alien woman space, almost like they knew her, respected her presence. It was clear she was not just a hunter, she was someone with authority here. The silence between them was heavy, but not hostile. Aaron found himself studying her when he thought she would not notice. The way her ears twitched at distant sounds, the way her shoulders moved with controlled strength. the way her tail never stilled completely. Everything about her spoke of discipline, of instinct sharpened by survival. They walked until the air grew cooler and the light dimmer. Vines hung thick above them, glowing faintly, weaving a ceiling of pale green light. Aaron felt as though they had stepped into another world within the jungle. His footsteps seemed too loud, so he slowed, trying to match her quiet grace. Then suddenly she stopped. Aaron froze behind her, unsure if danger was near. Her ears twitched, and she turned her head slightly, eyes narrowing. From the shadows, a low growl echoed. Aaron's stomach tightened. More of them. Shapes appeared between the trees, tall, feline forms, eyes glowing in the dim light. They were like her, but each carried a different bearing. Some crouched low, ready to spring. Others stood tall, tails lashing with suspicion. Aaron's pulse spiked. He was surrounded. The woman stepped forward, her tail snapping once through the air. A sharp hiss left her throat, commanding and strong. The others stilled, their eyes shifting between her and the human. For a moment, Aaron thought they would attack anyway, but then something passed between them, a silent understanding. Slowly, the others backed away, retreating into the shadows, though their eyes lingered. Aaron let out a shaky breath. She had protected him, he realized. She had claimed him in front of her people. That was why they had stopped. The alien woman glanced back at him, her eyes fierce and unreadable. She spoke again, a single short phrase, and her tail brushed once, more against his chest. Aaron's breath caught. He didn't know the language, but he understood enough. He was no longer just a trespasser. She had marked him as hers. And now, whether he wanted it or not, his fate was tied to hers. Aaron's legs felt heavy as he followed her deeper into the jungle. The memory of the glowing eyes still lingered in his mind, and he kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting the others to return. But they didn't. They had obeyed her, even when they looked ready to strike. That meant something. She was not just another hunter of her kind. She had authority. And for reasons he still couldn't understand, she had used that authority to protect him. The jungle grew quieter as they moved. The hum of insects and the calls of unseen birds faded, replaced by a softer sound, the trickle of water somewhere ahead. Aaron's boots sank into softer ground, and soon he saw the shine of a narrow stream cutting through the trees. She stopped at the water's edge and turned, her sharp eyes fixing on him. He froze, unsure what she wanted. Then she crouched by the stream, scooped water into her hands, and drank. When she glanced at him again, Aaron understood. Carefully, slowly, he knelt by the water too. His reflection in the rippling surface looked pale and tense. He cupped his hands, took a sip, and let the coolness ease his dry throat. When he looked up, she was still watching him. Her ears twitched and her tail flicked once before settling. She made a short sound, low and rough, as though testing him. He had no way to answer, but he raised his hand slightly, palm open, and nodded. Something in her gaze softened, only for a second before she rose and motioned again for him to follow. They walked side by side now, not close, but no longer at a distance. Aaron kept his movements calm, careful to match her pace. He thought about speaking, about trying words, gestures, anything that might build understanding, but each time he opened his mouth, he stopped himself. If he said the wrong thing, his tone carried even a hint of threat, this fragile balance could shatter. The path ahead narrowed, the trees leaning closer together, their vines twisting down like living ropes. Bioluminescent plants glowed faintly, casting strange light across her face. Aaron found himself studying her more closely, though he tried not to make it obvious. Her features were sharp but striking, every motion fluid with purpose. She was young, yet carried herself with the weight of responsibility, and despite the fear she had brought him earlier, there was something undeniably compelling about her presence. At last, they reached a clearing. The ground opened into a wide circle where tall stones jutted up, carved with strange markings that glowed faintly in the dark. Aaron slowed, his breath catching at the sight. This was no ordinary place. It was sacred, maybe ancient. He realized with a jolt that this might be why humans were warned never to cross the jungle boundaries. This was what her people were guarding. The alien woman stepped into the circle with quiet confidence, her tail swaying behind her. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable, and gestured sharply for him to follow. Aaron hesitated only a second before stepping into the circle. The air here felt different, heavier, humming with energy he couldn't explain. She moved closer to him now, her steps slow, deliberate. Aaron's body tensed as she stopped just in front of him. Her hand lifted again, claws gleaming faintly in the light. For an instant he thought she might test him with another show of strength. Instead, she touched his chest with the tip of her tail, pressing firmly directly over his heart. The gesture sent a shiver through him. She looked into his eyes, her pupils narrowing, her ears forward in full focus. She spoke a short phrase, in her own language, low, steady, and filled with meaning he couldn't grasp. But even without understanding the words, Aaron felt the weight of them. It was not a threat this time. It was a declaration. His breath caught. Slowly, carefully, he nodded. "I don't know your words," he whispered, "but I understand. You're choosing me." Her expression didn't change, but her ears twitched at his voice and her tail brushed across his chest once more before retreating. Then she stepped back and circled him, moving with the same careful precision as before. Only this time it didn't feel like she was deciding whether to kill him. It felt like she was marking him, showing him to the circle itself, as if introducing him to something greater. Aaron stood still, fighting the urge to shift nervously. The glowing symbols carved into the stone seemed to pulse softly as she moved. He had no idea if it was his imagination or if the stones truly reacted to her presence. But the thought made his skin prickle. When she returned to stand in front of him, she spoke again, longer this time. Her words flowed like a chant, firm and rhythmic. Aaron could only listen, wishing he could understand. She finished with a hiss, not threatening but final, and placed her hand against his shoulder. The meaning was clear enough. Whatever this ritual was, whatever bond she had just claimed, it was done. Aaron exhaled slowly, trying to accept the weight of it. He had come here as a soldier, curious and reckless. Now he stood in a sacred place, marked and chosen by someone he barely knew. He didn't understand the rules, the language, or the risks. But one thing was certain: he was no longer just an intruder. He was part of something he could not yet name, and as he looked into her fierce, glowing eyes, he realized there was no turning back. Aaron's chest still felt the faint pressure where her tail had rested. The touch lingered like a mark, invisible but heavy with meaning. He did not understand her words, but every movement she made told him this was no ordinary gesture. She had claimed something. She had chosen him, though he had no idea why. The clearing was silent except for the soft hum that seemed to rise from the glowing stones. The air felt alive, charged with something beyond his understanding. Aaron shifted uneasily, glancing at the alien woman. She stood tall and unshaken, her sharp eyes locked on him as though measuring his every reaction. Her ears twitched slightly, at the smallest sound, but her focus never left him. Aaron wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the weight of the place and the fierceness of her gaze held his tongue. Instead, he waited. She tilted her head, studying him, and then stepped forward. Slowly, she placed her hand on his chest where her tail had pressed before. Her claws brushed lightly over his uniform but did not cut. She made another sound, short and certain like a name or a claim. His pulse quickened. He didn't understand the word, but he understood the intent. She was declaring it again, making it clear that whatever this bond was, it was not an accident. "I don't know what this means," he whispered, "but I'll accept it." His voice seemed to carry through the circle, though he doubted she knew his words. Still her ears flicked, and her eyes softened for only a heartbeat before she stepped back. Her tail swayed once, sharp and precise, then she turned and gestured for him to follow. Aaron hesitated, then obeyed. He had little choice, but deep inside, curiosity outweighed his fear. She had spared his life, shielded him from her people, and now marked him in some way he couldn't yet understand. He needed to know why. The path beyond the clearing led uphill, roots twisting like steps beneath their feet. She moved with effortless grace while Aaron had to watch each step carefully. His boots slipped once on the damp moss, and he caught himself against a tree. She glanced back at him, her ears twitching, and for a moment he thought he saw amusement flicker across her face before it vanished. At the top of the slope, the trees opened to reveal a wide view of the jungle below. The sky above glowed with streaks of alien colors, the horizon painted with shades of deep violet and burning gold as two suns sank behind the canopy. Aaron stopped, his breath catching at the sight. It was beautiful, untamed and vast. She stood at the edge, her tail swaying slowly, as though the view was as important to her as the ritual had been. She lifted her chin, watching the sky, then looked back at him. Her expression was unreadable, but the way her tail flicked toward the horizon seemed like a message. Look, remember, understand. Aaron stepped beside her, careful not to move too close. Is this what you're protecting? He asked softly, knowing she would not answer. Still, speaking eased the weight in his chest. This land, this beauty. Maybe that's why no one's allowed here. For a moment they simply stood there side by side, watching as the jungle below glowed with the light of countless bioluminescent plants. The hum of the world grew louder, alive with unseen energy. Aaron felt small in the face of it, but he also felt strangely connected, as if standing here beside her gave him permission to see what few humans ever had. Then her ears twitched sharply. She turned her head, eyes narrowing, body tense. Aaron's heart jumped. He followed her gaze and saw movement below, dark shapes weaving between the trees, fast and deliberate. The same feline figures as before. She hissed low, her tail lashing, once in warning. Aaron tensed, his hand brushing against the strap of his weapon, but he did not draw it. He had learned enough to know that showing his gun would only make things worse. The figures did not climb the slope, but stopped at its base. They stared up at him with glowing eyes, their tails swishing with unease. One of them let out a sharp sound, a bark-like call that echoed through the jungle. It was aimed not at him, but at her. Aaron looked at her, waiting. She straightened, shoulders squared, and let out a sharp hiss in response, louder, filled with command. The others fell silent. For a long moment no one moved. Then slowly, they melted back into the shadows of the jungle, leaving only the quiet hum of insects behind. Aaron let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "They're not happy with me," he murmured. She turned to him then, her eyes fierce, her ears tilted forward. She stepped closer, tail flicking against his side, as if to remind him of her claim. The message was clear. As long as she stood, with him no one else would touch him. Aaron felt the weight of it sink into his chest. She had risked her standing among her own kind by choosing him. Whatever bond she had placed on him, it was not small. It tied them both together in a way he did not yet understand. He met her gaze and nodded, his voice quiet but certain. "Then, I'll stand with you too." The alien woman tilted her head, studying him one last time, then turned back toward the horizon. Her tail brushed lightly across his chest again, a reminder of the choice already made. And Aaron knew then that this bond was more than survival. It was the beginning of something far larger, something that would shape not just his fate, but hers as well. Aaron followed her down the slope, his boots sliding on the damp ground as the last light of the twin suns faded from the sky. The jungle grew darker, the glowing plants and vines lighting their path with soft pulses of green and blue. The air was cooler now, filled with the distant cries of night creatures. Every sound echoed more sharply, and Aaron felt the weight of being in a place that belonged to her people, not his. She moved ahead of him, sure-footed, every step careful but confident. Her tail swayed lightly, and her ears twitched at every rustle. Aaron could not help but admire the way she seemed to belong here completely. He, in contrast, felt clumsy, every snapped twig under his boot too loud, every movement reminding him he was an outsider. For a while, neither of them spoke. She didn't look back, but he knew she was aware of him every second, listening to his breathing, tracking his pace. He kept his distance, neither too close nor too far. Something inside told him this was a test, though he did not know its rules. The path narrowed again, winding between towering roots that arched over them like walls. The hum of insects grew louder, mixing with the croaks of strange reptilian creatures. At one point, Aaron reached out to steady himself against a tree, only to pull his hand back quickly as the bark shifted under his touch. The tree had moved, its surface rippling like skin before settling again. He stared at it in shock. She glanced back at him, ears twitching, and let out a short sound that almost resembled amusement. Aaron shook his head with a faint smile despite his nerves. "Yeah, your world is full of surprises," he muttered. They kept moving until the air changed again. It grew warmer, filled with the faint scent of flowers, sweet and sharp at once. Then the jungle opened into another hidden space. Aaron stopped, his breath catching. Before him stretched a sanctuary unlike anything he had imagined. Enormous trees curved upward, their branches weaving together to form a natural dome. Bioluminescent plants glowed in clusters across the ground, painting the space in shifting shades of green, violet, and gold. Small streams of water ran between the roots, their surfaces shining with faint light. Strange creatures with delicate wings hovered above the flowers, their movements slow, almost dreamlike. It was beautiful, untouched, alive in a way that made Aaron feel both humbled and unworthy to stand there. He realized this must be a sacred place, hidden from outsiders for generations. His chest tightened with the weight of what it meant to be here. The alien woman stepped into the sanctuary as if it were her home. Her tail moved with slow grace, her head lifting with pride. She turned slightly, watching him as if to see how he would react. Aaron stepped forward carefully, his boots barely making a sound against the soft moss. He kept his eyes open, trying to take in every detail without showing disrespect. "This is what you wanted to show me," he whispered, though he knew she would not answer. His voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from awe. As they walked deeper into the sanctuary, Aaron noticed movement. More figures appeared among the trees. Other members of her kind. They were tall and strong like her, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Some crouched low, their tails flicking with suspicion. Others stood still, watching him with narrowed eyes. Their expressions made it clear he was not welcome. Aaron's stomach tightened. He had expected this. Whatever choice she had made, it would not be accepted easily. He fought the urge to raise his hands in surrender. Any sign of weakness could be dangerous, but so could defiance. He stood tall, keeping his gaze steady, his breathing calm. The alien woman stepped in front of him, her stance protective. She hissed sharply, her voice carrying authority. The others responded with low growls, their tails lashing, but none moved forward. Aaron realized then how much she was risking. She had chosen him in a place where her people could see, claiming him not just in secret but before witnesses. One of the warriors stepped forward, his chest broad, his eyes burning with challenge. He let out a short, harsh phrase that Aaron could not understand. The woman snapped back in her own language, her words sharp and commanding. Her tail lashed once and her claws flexed at her side. The tension between them was heavy, almost ready to break into violence. Aaron's pulse pounded. He wanted to step back, but he forced himself to stay still. If he retreated now, he would shame her choice. She had put herself between him and her people, and the least he could do was stand firm. The standoff lasted long moments. Finally, the warrior gave a low growl, his tail flicking in frustration, and stepped back into the shadows. The others followed, though their eyes lingered on Aaron with clear distrust. Aaron let out a slow breath. He looked at her, his chest heavy with gratitude he could not put into words. She had defended him again, not just against strangers, but against her own kind. She glanced back at him, her eyes fierce, then softened only for a moment. She made a low sound, quiet enough that only he could hear, and touched her tail once more against his chest. The meaning was clear. You belong to me. Aaron nodded, his voice low but steady. Then I'll stay, no matter what comes. The jungle, around them, pulsed with life, the sanctuary glowing brighter as night deepened. Aaron realized then that his fate was bound to hers, not by accident, but by choice. Hers, and now his as well, had brushed against his chest once more, sealing the choice she had made before her people. Around them the others had retreated into the shadows, but their eyes still lingered, bright and watchful. He could feel the weight of their suspicion, pressing down on him like the thick jungle air. Yet she stood tall beside him, her body angled protectively, her sharp eyes daring anyone to challenge her claim. In that moment, Aaron understood just how far she had gone. By choosing him, she had not only risked her own safety, but her honor among her people. And still, she had not wavered. The silence stretched, broken only by the hum of glowing plants and the distant calls of the jungle. Finally, one of the older figures stepped forward from the edge of the sanctuary. His fur was streaked with gray, his movements slower, but filled with authority. His eyes narrowed at Aaron, then shifted to the woman. He spoke in low tones, each word deliberate, carrying weight Aaron could not understand but could feel. She answered firmly, her voice sharp but respectful. The two locked eyes for a long moment. The elder studied Aaron as if peeling back every layer of his soul, then let out a sound that was neither approval nor threat. He stepped back, leaving the decision in her hands. Aaron exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing only slightly. He knew then that her people would not stop her, but neither would they accept him easily. He was not one of them. He was human. To them he was fragile, an intruder, and perhaps even a danger. But she had chosen anyway. She turned back to him, her expression unreadable, and motioned for him to follow. Together they walked deeper into the sanctuary, where the glowing streams wound between roots and flowers. The air here was softer, warmer, filled with a sense of quiet power. Aaron felt as though the very ground was watching him, testing him. They stopped at a pool where water glowed faintly, lit from beneath by some strange mineral or energy. She knelt by the water and touched it with her hand. Then she looked at him and gestured. Aaron hesitated, then knelt beside her. The water was cool against his skin, sending a shiver through him. She pressed her hand to his chest once more, right over his heart, then to her own chest, and finally lowered her hand into the glowing pool. The meaning was clear, even without words. A bond, a vow. Aaron mirrored her gesture, pressing his palm against his chest, then lowering it into the water beside hers. For a moment, the pool glowed brighter, rippling with light. The sanctuary seemed to hum louder, as if recognizing the act. She studied him closely, her ears tilted forward, her tail flicking once as if satisfied. Then she spoke again, repeating the word she had said before, the one that sounded like a claim. Her voice was softer this time, but steady, full of certainty. Aaron's throat tightened. He didn't know her language, but he knew the truth of what she had done. She had marked him, chosen him, and now bound him to her world in front of her people and whatever ancient force lived in this place. He nodded, his voice low but certain. I accept. Whatever this means, I'll stand by it. The words were simple, but they carried his heart. For the first time since arriving in this jungle, he felt no fear. He felt part of something greater than himself. She rose gracefully, her tail brushing lightly against his side as if sealing the promise. Together they turned back toward the others. The silent watchers had not left. Their glowing eyes followed every movement. Some hissed low in disapproval, but none stepped forward. They had seen the ritual. They had seen the bond. Whether they liked it or not, it was done. Aaron stood taller now, not as a trespasser but as someone chosen. He still felt the strangeness of their stares, the danger of being an outsider, but he also felt strength beside him. Her strength. He knew she would defend him, and he would defend her in return. As they left the sanctuary, the jungle opened before them, alive with the sounds of the night. Aaron looked at the vast wilderness, at the glowing plants and towering trees, and realized he was no longer just a soldier on a mission. He was part of this world now, bound to it through her. She glanced back at him, her eyes glowing faintly, her expression unreadable but her tail brushing against his side once more. It was a small gesture, yet filled with meaning. A reminder of the choice made. Aaron let out a slow breath and walked beside her, no longer afraid of the path ahead. He didn't know what challenges would come, what her people would demand, or what dangers the jungle still held. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He would not face it alone. For she had chosen him, and in return, he had chosen her.